This is
Essential.
This is Essential Audio.
Hi, and welcome to the MoneyPot, our podcast here at Money 2020. Scarlett is still traveling the globe, so today I'm lucky to be joined by my colleague Monique Ruff-Bell, Director of Money 2020 USA. Welcome, Monique.
Thank you, Sanjib. I am really looking forward to this. It will be my first time hosting the podcast.
You'll be a natural.
Speaking of traveling the globe, didn't you just get back from China where you got to join a startup demo day for Guppy?
I did, and while I was there, I had a total payments geek out moment. I opened an Alipay account.
Oh yeah, Alipay just opened up their apps to non-locals in China so that non-residents can pay with it.
Absolutely. They kind of had to. The Alipay and WeChat payment systems are so ubiquitous, many business owners prefer to take their payments that way, so if you take out cash, they'll look at you strange. So I went to a bar called the Beer Museum in Changsha and bought beer with the app.
So how was it?
The beer was good, but for me, the checkout experience was a happy hour for a payments geek. It was a totally frictionless happy experience.
Well, that is one way to have fun. So is that what we are talking about this week?
Kind of. A nice frictionless retail experience is great, and it was nice to use the app that locals do to see how the system worked. But today, we're talking about fixing a much bigger issue, the race to fix the global financial system.
You mean to fix the broken financial system. So we're building on last week when we gave everyone a taste of what was discussed at the conference around stablecoins and Facebook's Kalita project.
Yeah, we decided to look at the history of the problem a little bit deeper and to look at who the other players could be besides Facebook. So we decided to talk a little more with Shamir Karkal.
I found his talk about the history of the financial grid really interesting, particularly how he tied it back to former financial crises and why a new system is needed. He made the argument that the global financial system is broken, and instead of continuing to patch it, a new one is needed. But I don't think most people think the system is broken.
And part of the reason is that it isn't broken. It's working as designed.
It was designed to be a patchwork?
It was designed to be local. As localities grew, they worked the systems together. So when we spoke to Shamir, he had a great analogy.
In the 1980s or early 90s, if you had asked somebody, is the global telephone network broken? Most people would have been like, no. I can call anybody on the planet. And there were many systems in each country in the world, but they were all connected. What was the problem? Why did you need something like the internet? Why did you need everybody on the planet to be on one network or internetwork of networks, which is what the internet is? And explaining to somebody in 1992 that the internet would completely change everything would have been really hard. You would have kept coming up into these debates, where people would have been like, but the system works. Look, I can pick up this phone and I can call somebody in India right now. But I think that's how these discussions tend to end up being, is it's so hard to get people to imagine all the possibilities that open up when you take 5 billion people and put them on the same system. We've already put all of those people on the same network system. Imagine if we put all of them on the same financial system.
So the current system works kinda, but it is a bit like the old phone system where lots of landlines were patched together with scratchy connections. Whereas now, with mobile technology, I can travel all over the world. I don't have to find a phone because I carry it with me, and I can call my son and the connection is clearer, cheaper, and faster than it ever was then.
I remember calling overseas back then was so expensive, and you had to schedule it to make sure that everyone would be home at the same time. It was almost hard to remember.
I can't possibly remember. I am way too young.
Of course you are. But it was a pain. But describing how it can be better is difficult.
I was just watching the clip of Bill Gates describing the internet to David Letterman in the early 90s, and he described being able to stream a baseball game and stop and go at any time and read concurrent blogs or commentary on it. But for every new thing he described, Letterman talked about how it already existed as radio or a magazine or a tape recorder. It was hard to describe the shift that the internet would make to the experience.
Yeah, it is really difficult to describe how different the experience will be until they begin to experience it. But it is really important because there are 1.7 billion people that are unbanked and left out of the financial system. That leaves them vulnerable and left out of the opportunities in both local and international markets.
So, having the entire system be cheaper, faster, and more painless opens it up to those that are currently underserved. They could afford bank accounts, lending services, and have predictable costs that avoid unforeseen fees.
That's the goal. And if we look at how the internet changed the flow of information and who can access it, that is what we're talking about doing with money. For example, I paid one of my employees who works internationally. I have a small business account which has limitations on transfers. I had to transfer the money to a personal account, go to the branch, and then pay a transfer fee and an exchange rate fee so I could send my employee money.
So that sounds great. Why hasn't it been done?
Lots of reasons. Money is territorial. When the internet started, it was created in the US.
Right. It was created by the U.S. military, and they opened it up to anyone to use it as a tool.
And when it was being released, it was allowed to be freely adopted in the 90s because they didn't understand how much data and the information of individuals could be worth. But that isn't the case with money. Everybody knows controlling money has immense value, and so governments, companies, even individuals don't trust a single entity having complete control.
So that is one of the reasons we have seen so much resistance to Facebook leading this. There has been a lot in the news about their coalition losing members and making it harder for them to build Calibra.
Yeah, actually, Shamir spoke about this when we talked.
I'm personally probably biased against Facebook after sort of all the negative press that they have gotten over the last few years. I don't feel like I personally trust Facebook anymore. I deleted my own Facebook account a couple of years ago. And so from that perspective, I feel like Facebook is already powerful enough. If they were, in addition to having all the world's data, if they also had all the world's money, we might as well crown Mark Zuckerberg emperor of the planet right now, right? And so there's some philosophical viewpoints. I think whoever it is, it should be somebody who's not Facebook, and preferably not Google or Amazon or WeChat or any other sort of super large tech company, because how big do we want any one institution to get?
Before we get too hard on Facebook, we should recognize that they aren't the only big companies facing pushback when it comes to power over financial systems.
Yeah, Apple, who has a high trust factor, is facing their own issues around the reports that its algorithms are biased when it comes to issuing credit. And Google is being carefully scrutinized as it expands in this space in their partnership with Citibank.
And Facebook has a huge advantage. Over a third of the planet is on their apps. They have incredible reach.
In places like Myanmar and others, you will not be able to persuade people of the existence of the internet. There are smartphones, and on the smartphone you use Facebook. What else is there, right? So it is that much, that much part of the kind of the fabric of at least some people's understanding of the internet.
So governments are going to be torn. A new global financial system could reap countless benefits for their citizens and allow new money into their countries, strengthening tax bases and general welfare. But they may fear that a company like Facebook would simply have too much power.
Yeah, so their reach is a huge advantage, but it might be a disadvantage as well. Also, these governments might be competing with them.
Well, who else is interested in building this type of system?
Well, the Chinese government is going to try. The US has several players that are going to try as well.
So if not Facebook, where else will this start?
There are a lot of ideas about where it could start. Shamir thinks that the US is the best place.
I think the ideal place to start is the US. For a couple of reasons. One is that it is still the center of the global financial system, and the dollar is still the world's default currency. And it's also surprisingly, on a kind of a retail level, it's also very broken. So you can solve a lot of problems for Americans in finance still, and that is still valuable. So I think that's why the US is the right place to start it from.
That makes sense.
It does, but I'm not sure. I think the US is like a heavyweight lifter. They're big and strong and have been lifting weights for a long time. It's optimized to move a lot of big volume. But this might require some place that is more nimble, like a gymnast. And the developing markets are leapfrogging our legacy technologies.
Where do you think it will be developed?
Well, unlike Shamir, I think it will be developed in a developing market. Southeast Asia, India, China are all candidates. Shamir and I agree that the adoption will be fastest there. We just have different ideas about where it will be developed.
Clearly, it looks like the race is on. It will be exciting to watch over the next 10 years. The one thing that seems certain is that it will be built, and it will depend on both technical capability and trust for adoption.
Exactly.
And that wraps up another episode of the Money Pot. Thank you to our producers, Roland Bodenham and Rachel Morrissey.
And thank you to our team, Sabina Osorio, Keisha Allison, and Monique. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, happy to. And please go subscribe to the Money Pot wherever you listen to your podcast. We will have a new episode in December where we talk about prediction for 2020.
This is
Essential.
This is Essential Audio.